Oh, hi there, welcome to TAS Film and TV Reviews. So this is my review of the brilliant 2026 drama Tiptoe, which is available in the UK on Channel 4. And I was giving this quite a lot of thought, and I don't think there's really any way to talk about this show in a meaningful and in-depth way without giving away spoilers. So if you haven't watched the show yet, I'd highly recommend to just click away, go and watch it. You won't be disappointed at all. So Tiptoe was created and written by Russell T Davies, and he was the previous creator of It's a Sin and Years, and it stars Alan Cumming as gay bar owner Leo and David Morrissey as socially conservative electrician Clive, and they just happen to be neighbours. And then it has a wide ensemble cast including Clive's family and Leo's friends and colleagues. And very briefly, it's a 5-part drama in which each episode comes in at about 45 minutes or so, or about an hour with adverts. And the Manchester drama, it follows an escalating conflict between these two neighbours, Leo and Clive, and the drama, it uses a flash forward technique to reveal a tragedy at the start of episode 1 before then documenting over the following 5 episodes the preceding days leading up to the tragedy for Leo, Clive and the people around them. And there were so many things that I really loved about this series, but I'll try to categorise them as best I can. And although it sounds counterintuitive, I'm going to start with the tragic ending, because I think the main thing to say is that it really left a mark on me, after I finished watching the show. I thought it was just so powerfully done, and I was thinking about it for days after. And I think what's really good about the ending, and I don't know if other people had this feeling, but I was watching the season unfold, and particularly in episodes 3 and 4, I was just hoping against hope that something would transpire which would change the outcome. Perhaps they'd reveal it was like a bad dream or something and everything would work out okay in the end. And in that sense, I thought it was just such a powerful piece of storytelling, because if we already know the outcome at the start of the show, and that's before we even get to the story, how do you carry that successfully, building tension and suspense through what's basically 4.5 episodes? So for me, it was really testament to the way they told the story. It was testament to the writing that they were able to carry it off. And then just talking about the ending specifically, I really like the nod to the zombie series that Leo and Stephanie were watching on TV during episode 5, because then we see all these young lads, in their football kits, consumed by hatred and whipped up into a frenzy, moving like a pack of zombies, and they just won't stop until someone's strung up, literally. And then, of course, we get the powerful iconography at the very end with Leo's feet in shot and us watching Clive just standing there through Leo's legs. And for me, it had echoes of the 1940 Charlie Chaplin movie, The Great Dictator. Because in that movie, you have these Nazi stormtroopers lining up to string Chaplin up to the nearest lamppost. And then it also called to mind a scene in the 2019 movie, Jojo Rabbit, in which you see this young boy who sees his mum hanging in the town square. And of course, both of those movies are depictions of the Second World War. So I think there's some powerful parallels there around the nature of hatred and what we see in this series. And then also just loved that the characters were not one-dimensional or just crude stereotypes. With Leo, we get this sense that he knows something bad is coming, as he points out in the very final scene at the end of episode 5. But during the series and over the course of the 5 episodes, there's just this naivety and innocence on show from him, in which he just sort of almost refuses to believe that anything bad might actually happen to him. He sees it all unfolding in front of him, but he doesn't seem to take it seriously for whatever reason. And going back to Charlie Chaplin's movie, The Great Dictator, Chaplin's Jewish character in that film, he loses his memory during World War I, and he then returns home 20 years later to this oppressive state where Jews are being persecuted. And I got that feeling with Leo, that he has those memories of the 1980s, the HIV moral panic, the hatred that gay people were exposed to back then. But it's like he forgot, he got comfortable on Canal Street and in his metropolitan bubble, and he just forgot the threat that has always existed towards minorities, but which perhaps had maybe been dormant in the 90s and early 2000s. And over the course of the drama, we see his shock and upset at some of Clive's more unhinged comments and behaviour. But even then, when faced with that, he still defaults to naivety and blindly trying to help and make things better. And of course, with Clive, we see all the anger and all the misinformed nonsense about vaccines, COVID or HIV that he comes out with. But then we also see moments of vulnerability, humour. We see the repressed homosexuality, perhaps. So we see his bravado, but we also see something of a scared little boy, with lots of shame and perhaps someone who hasn't had much love and support across their life, but ultimately, a very deeply unhappy man in most respects. I think that's obvious from the storytelling. And yet with Clive, we see that despite all the anger and the animosity towards Leo and the shame he feels about what his sons are up to, there are still so many opportunities over the course of the drama for things to turn out differently or for him to take a different turn. And I get the sense that the writer wanted us to have some hope in that sense, but also communicate to the viewers that happenstance or, a series of unfortunate coincidences can just lead to tragedy when people hold these sort of views. And that's one of the reasons why the drama was so effective, in my opinion, because the characters are believable and they ensure that we're not just left with one emotion at the end. And then I also really liked how the series explored the differences between online spaces and real life. And I thought it was really clever how the series is interspersed with moments of genuine humour and banter between Clive and Leo. Because for much of the series, despite their disagreements, most of their interactions are actually well-natured, probably by virtue of the fact that they know each other. Whereas to compare it to online spaces, everything is much more transactional online, and two people could rarely have a 14-year relationship or have that back and forth online. But what I found really interesting is that because Clive is in his 50s, it's evident that he didn't develop his ideas and worldview just through social media. Ultimately, he's probably been radicalised and consuming harmful ideas for years, perhaps from the mainstream media or from his friends, which then, coupled with his various resentments, lead him to feel this sort of anger and rage towards Leo and other minorities. And whereas the show mostly focuses on social media as the modern form, it also highlights the long-standing bigotry that's existed in this country for decades, and which, as I said earlier, has just been perhaps dormant there in the background. And then, of course, it really captures all of the divisions at the heart of our society, which are well documented, but, which people might often suggest started with Brexit or COVID or the financial crash maybe. But by virtue of Clive and Leo's age, the drama makes clear that these divisions have always been there in recent times. Maybe previously they lacked a formal space in which to proliferate. So I'll give you an example, maybe when Clive and his mates were at the pub of an evening, that would be that, and the thoughts and comments that they come out with in that environment would just dissipate into the night air, whereas now there's a space for these thoughts and feelings to be documented and to be amplified. And then, of course, the show really captures the nihilism of social media so well. For example, we see Clive doom scrolling, we see Clive's son Saul selling sex videos for money on OnlyFans, we see hookups and casual sex at the touch of a button via Grindr and various other apps, and all of which to some extent makes online spaces seem harmless. But of course, what we also learn is that the harmless scrolling and frivolous sexual content is also offered alongside a diet of hatred and division. And then finally, I also liked how it captured the impact of social media and online discourse on day-to-day life. So as with Clive and Leo, previously we talked to our neighbours, we'd share a joke even if we disagreed with them, whereas in this drama we see that things can be recorded and shared against our will, and that then doesn't give us any recourse to conversation. Things can be taken out of context and any nuance is sort of stripped away. And so overall I thought it was a really valuable exploration of the impact of social media on people of all ages, and then how that compares to maybe what times were like before social media. And then finally, I've watched a number of dramas and films of late which emphasise the moment that we're living in and which highlight that hatred and bigotry are on the increase. Stuff like Fargo Season 5, Mussolini Son of the Century, or Nuremberg the movie. And so I'm left with a similar question here. Why has the writer or creator decided to tell this story now? And I think in this instance, in the drama, both Melba and Leo give us the answer to that in no uncertain terms. Both of them talk about the fact that hatred has been and is being mainlined and mainstreamed in ways that it just wasn't 10 or 15 years ago. And they both highlight the fact that the effect of that is always the same. It's those who are visibly different who bear the brunt. Religious and ethnic minorities, disabled people, trans people, openly gay people. And of course the stats bear that out, don't they? Hate crime across the board has shot up in recent years. So I found that as well as being an amazing drama in its own right, it also contained an extremely powerful message and one which needs to be heard. And I took that to be that if you don't want this to be the norm, first we have to recognise what's happening, and then we have to try to do whatever is in our power to change it, because otherwise tragedy can easily unfold. So in summary, I think this is an essential piece of drama at a critical moment in time. And for that reason, I think it's a triumph both as a piece of drama and art, but then also something deeper and, dare I say it, political. And as I just said, what I take away is that this is for us to enjoy, yes, but it's also for us to reflect on and think about deeply. And yeah, for me, for those reasons, it's highly recommended. And of course, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.